I sat under the table, my hand growing cool from the soft chill of the stone. I picked up a piece of straw from the floor and began wrapping it carefully around my thumb. To my left dangled the legs of my mother, red hair growing from them softly dusted. She wore no shoes at the moment, and her legs were crossed. The other pair belonged to Auntie. I was playing with my doll while they talked. He was my favorite toy. I played with him most of the time. His name was Finn. I told Finn my secrets, but I can get to that part a bit later. I could hear them talking. Sister, you must be more careful. I know, love. It is just you and me now. That was my mum. I can't lose you also. So strange with only two. I don't know if I could go on alone. Carlin, come out from under the table, love. I crawled out. I was only young, small, and delicate. My auburn hair was shaggy, and freckles dotted my nose. Auntie locked eyes with me, her stare solid but unyielding. Her eyes were pale steel, a color so bland but so shimmering sharp, like the edge of a blade. Her eyes cut deep, and I felt like she could see, like she could feel. I pulled my eyes away, looking at my mum. Her hair, like mine, was stark red, but fell like pins and danced around as she moved and twirled through a room, like a soft curtain of silk. My hair was curly, apparently inherited from my father. It was lighter also, strawberry blonde rather than the deep blood of my mother. My father tainted me. When I met her eyes, they did not cut like my aunt's, did not penetrate as if searching for an answer in me. My mother's eyes invited me in. As if the grass of the island had its birth around her iris, warm like a summer day, it melted my pressure and fear. Your hair is so long, Carlin. Do you want it cut? My auntie asked me that day. No, Auntie. Then you shall have it long, my mum whispered, before scooping me into her arms. Good night, sister. A swift flight through the night, and sweet dreams for you and young Carlin. It was a summer afternoon, and I sat outside and I watched the animals in the yard. We had many, and they chased each other here and there, never lingering long in one place. I spent this afternoon as I spent many a slow day when my mother was busy with one thing or another in the basement. I would wander to the riverside. It was a small creek that ran through the green hill around my mother's home. It did not run quickly, but it was also not stagnant and black like some smoldering moor. It was smooth and clear, reflective and calm. My hair had grown since the night years past when my auntie had last suggested I cut it. My delicate curls tickled my partly bare shoulders. Some blonde still remained through the red, though the red had deepened. I wore a loose tunic, woven for me by my mum. It was a pale blue. I wore a belt, a little bit above my hips, to pull it in around myself. I was still skinny, but age had made me taller and a little fuller than I had been. I did not always stop to look at myself, so this is why I remembered so vividly this particular fine afternoon, my particular image. My eyes matched the sky and were a deep blue that the northern sky turned in August. My hair had developed waves and would bounce and tickle my shoulders in the breeze. My freckles had remained, my small nose was still sprinkled with them. Ripples shattered my mirror. A small frog had hopped out of the water and onto a small rock by the shore. I admired the little speckles on the frog's back. He let out a rivet. I slouched slow, the muscles in my legs contracting carefully as to not alert the little creature. I put my hands around it slowly, cupping my hands together. Once he was secure, I scurried back up the bank towards a small house my mother and I shared. Mum, I caught you a frog. Put it with the others, dear, thank you. You're welcome, Mum. Can I help you with anything? You could fetch me some water, darling. I am almost done grinding up this yarrow. Yes, Mum. We must look to tomorrow, Carlin. Find the answers to our questions. Yes, Mum. I went out back, and I grabbed the old wooden pail, dented and cracked, and pattered down to the river. I smiled as I looked at my reflection, dipped my bucket into the cool stream, and hurried back up the bank. I was met by my mother's smile, beaming as I opened the door. She welcomed me over to where she sat by the fire, and a small wooden dish that was carved with certain signs sat before her. She had me pour the water from the stream into the bowl, and she spoke softly under her breath. Her words danced on the wind, and they seemed to fall with the yarrow she sprinkled over the dish. At first, they seemed to fall at random, but soon formed the shapes of a head, simple but certain. As more yarrow fell, the hair around the head too grew. Slowly, my mother smiled as she watched the dancing herbs. She breathed softly over them, and they lost their shape. We both held our breaths and waited for tomorrow. It was a special occasion, a night of merriment. My mother and my aunt had built a grand pyre in the woods near my house. They had told me to sleep. They had told me to get rest, but I had snuck quietly from my bed. It was not difficult, for a violent storm raged over our island, and thunder struck. The rain rattled on the leaves, and the wind howled and cooed. To this ruckus, my aunt and mother danced around the great blaze. They were in step with the sound of the storm. Every boom of thunder corresponded to a brandish of their naked bodies. I watched from the trees, from the shadows. My hair was weighed down from the downpour around me. I felt it sticking to my back and my chest. Still a light blonde hint was clearing it to me. Whenever I looked, I saw it anyway, no matter how much red still blonde came through. The fire was large enough that it was not hindered by the rain, but great steam poured from it, drifting with the embers above the naked sisters in the night. I was sure that there had been a moon. It would have been a full and glorious one. I watched the movements of them very carefully, every shift in step, every hesitation, every sway of the hips to the crashing and the blooming above. They moved so deliberately. I could not imagine myself. I could not imagine myself moving so, but why? Why would my body not respond like theirs, I wondered then? A flurry of bolts, and their bodies seemed to move with it, popping against each one. My eyes were seared with each flash. Memory. I was kneeling in wet mud, watching for hours. The storm provided crisp song, and my mother and aunt danced as if it was written for them. It seemed they spun even faster, and slowly I began to hear a song on the wind. It was not close enough to hear them slowly begin from whisper, as is customary. By the time I could hear their voices over the patter of the rain and the howling winds, they were projecting their ancient rhymes with bombastic glee. It was enchanting. The cold rain no longer bothered me, and I was lost in it. I felt a strange drifting feeling as minutes melted into hours. Eventually, the fire burned to nothing and was extinguished by the downpour that carried on, relentless. My aunt and mother, arm in arm, began walking back towards the house. I scurried ahead of them. I don't think they saw me in the dark. When they returned, they wrapped themselves in blankets and whispered by the fire. I fell asleep, damp. I dreamed often. In my dreams, the edges of my visions were always teased with red curls. I would fly through the dark night to a secluded rock in the middle of the sea. There I would play with the many women who were also there. They had sailed under the shining sky over a cloudy sea to this place. Or I imagine that's what I dreamed. I don't really remember. Sometimes I would dream of the Norns. They would sit on their chairs. They would weave shimmering silk spools of gold wound around boar tusks. Spinning and spinning, eyes sparkling blue and gold, dancing lights all around me. I was spinning in the spool. I was part of the thread. Where was I wound? Who had I found? Could I see it clearly yet? My thread amber. Can't remember where I stopped and the next began. Who can? Faster gyrations back and forth, disorienting, of course. Orienting up was possible, but endless, out, seeping in all directions. No reflections in the polished gold, only fog where my face should have been. I was an amber blob floating on the thread of time, spinning faster and faster, deeper and deeper, into blissful disexistence. But then I would wake up. I soon realized that I learned much of my mother's craft in the games we would play, the runes I would read, and the stories that she'd tell. I learned without laboring. It came naturally to me. I was grateful for this. Little charms and healing magic came easy, as did invoking the ancient staves. I was always learning more, seeking out knowledge. My mother said I must carry the bloodline now. There was an early morning where I had risen with the sun to see it reflected warmly on the creek. I saw fire in the water. I felt weak and dropped to my knees. I sat staring directly into the water, watching as the fire was below a dam. The fire burned tall and hot. The wood supports of the stone dam were catching. I watched in anticipation. The fire slowly charred the wood, the embers floating through the air, almost as if through water. The beams caught next and burnt hot. My heart beat so loudly that it seemed as though 100 drums pounded within me. And the dam burst, the beams breaking loose. Blood poured forth from the dam, deep and red, rolling over itself as it poured toward me, toward the surface of the water, so it seemed. My eyes were locked. I could not look away. I used all my strength holding myself up to look at it, but I could not let myself down either. I just watched, as with a cruel slowness the red wave crashed toward me. I held my breath as it was about to burst forth from the surface of the water. Then, like a kick in the chest, I collapsed to the grass. The vision in the water faded. The sun had risen. If I had to guess, some time had gone by since when I began looking into the creek, and I violently vomited. The creek was serene, though, perfect, no red at all. I had gotten vomit in my hair that day. I wiped my mouth with the nasty stuff and pulled off my tunic slowly. Undoing the belt around my waist, slipping out of all of my clothes, my pale body stumbled into the river, my hair caught in the current. And as it flowed behind me, I noticed how long it had grown. Wet and pulled by the soft tug of the stream, it stretched nearly to my height. The curls and braids I kept it in had been hiding the length from me. I was glowing, my mouth softly smiling. The pull of the creek felt amazing, my hair drifting within it. It was an auspicious night. My aunt and mother had been drinking honey wine all afternoon, but now the orange harvest moon rose above our little island and a great fire had been built. 3 dresses had been laid out, for 3 were to be worn. The weather was clear and the spirits were cooperative. It was to be my very first ritual. I was to participate and be transformed by it. I had studied this ritual for a long time. It was what I had always wanted. In hidden ways, with uneasy feelings, I wished for it. My mother was with me, holding one hand, my aunt holding the other. The fire was struck, and we danced. I had thought they'd been dancing to the storms, but there was music all around. My ancestors played through the ages. I felt their music and heard their songs. I danced with my heart, my feet only followed by chance. I felt connected to their ways, their freedoms from sin and modernity. We spun in circles round the great fire as the embers crackling rose above us toward the amber moon. Flowers were added to my hair over the course of the dances, more and more as the night went on. My head grew heavy with them. Soon paint was applied, contouring and highlighting. The spirits sung on, louder and clearer. I looked into the flames as I danced, and I saw them sitting in great halls. They smiled upon me. I could smell their feast, their mead, their sweat, or was it mine? My eyes sparkled, my hair shimmered in the firelight. It was redder than I'd ever seen it before. The orange light cast by the moon and fire made it seem purer than ever. I let out a sigh as my body convulsed to the spiritual rhythm. My periphery was teased with red curls. We danced and danced, our ancestors coming down, joining us at times, appearing as small fiery figures dancing in time with us. The pyre was burning down and dawn approached. A stone bench, which had been at the center of the fire, sat now exposed, facing the dawn. I laid myself upon it and allowed the heat to travel into me. The paint staves on my body glowed a deep red as morning light peeked over the edge of the world. It was transformative. I felt a deep, warm sense of completion. I sat up and began a new day. I had been touched by the dawn.